No man has the right to dictate what other men should perceive, create, or produce, but all men should be encouraged to reveal themselves through perceptions and emotions, and to build confidence in the creative spirit. Ansel Adams. You're listening to the GigabyteSpyder podcast, where I talk about anything I want to talk about. This episode is all about tips and words of encouragement that I would give to someone who's just getting started in the expensive but rewarding hobby of photography. In no particular order, these tips aren't going to be technical in nature, more so just recommendations for how to approach and navigate the beginning of a photographer's journey. They're largely aimed at beginners, but perhaps intermediate and experts should find value in them as well. Even if you're not into photography specifically, I think some of these things could also apply to other trades and hobbies. First, a disclaimer: I'm by no means a professional or expert photographer. I consider myself an intermediate hobbyist, but after practicing the craft for about 4 years, I'd like to think I have some decent wisdom to share. Of course, more experienced folks can chime in and contribute if they like. All that said, let's begin. Number 1. Gear is secondary to personal skill. The idea here is that one shouldn't get caught up in the hype of having certain pieces of gear right away. As a beginner, you don't really know yet what your natural photographic vision is, so you can't really know what pieces of gear you absolutely need right out of the gate. Ideally, you want to save your money until you can identify a need during your photographic career that requires specific gear that you'll use on a regular and cost-effective basis. This can include certain memory cards, camera bags, tripods, etc. Some of these things are considered essential for many people, but some are certainly less essential than others. The best plan is to make a well-researched one-time investment into a camera and/or starter kit, then spend the time to know the ins and outs of that setup. Spending the necessary time to learn everything with one simple setup would not only force you to truly know the strengths and pitfalls of what you have, but it will also challenge you to problem solve in order to overcome those pitfalls. These problem solving skills are going to be far more valuable than more expensive gear. I first started in photography between 2015 and 2016, I think. I started with the Canon PowerShot SX520HS, which was a bridge camera with a built-in telescopic lens. It was great to develop basic shooting habits, but it was clumsy to operate and it only offered JPEG photos. So I upgraded to the Canon Rebel T6 with a simpler workflow and better editing capability. That camera also had the very basics for controlling every aspect of a photograph, so I could therefore pick up photography concepts and improve my photographic process much more easily. By early 2020, I realized that I wanted better image quality in low light, so I upgraded again to the Canon 6D Mark I. And I'm still using this today, even if it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of its later iterations. I mean, it would be nice to have a swivel screen so I don't have to be in funky positions to get the right angle, but I can live with that. The point here is that I make do with what I had first, improving on whatever skills I can, in spite of the technical flaws of the setup that can either be worked around or ignored for the time being. It was only when I felt I had reached a certain level of competency did I feel comfortable enough to upgrade towards a certain direction. It does one good for their photographic journey and their wallet to not jump into upgrading gear and setup as soon as possible. As I said, the intangible skills that come with just practicing photography with any camera are going to be more invaluable than the gear you use. Number 2. Sample all types of photography and really experiment. I'm of the opinion that beginners can't really say what kind of photography that really rewards them until they try it all. Just about any camera and any lens can be used for any kind of photography, so it behooves someone just starting out to really get their feet wet and try every genre in every situation possible, just in order to see what really gets their creative juices flowing the most. Don't be afraid to bounce photography genres depending on where you are and what you like. I like to think of myself as mainly a nature photographer, but I also get a buzz from urban photography as well. Photography is an art form, and thus there's theoretically no rules to follow beyond the laws of physics. Take the time to really feel around and find the kind of shots that you naturally gravitate towards. At the end of this process, you'll have a better idea for the kind of photographer you want to be in the long term, and from that you'll know what skills to hone and what gear you should sink your money into. Number 3. Be spontaneous and don't overthink. If you're like me and tends to get obsessed with the technical aspects of photography, it helps to remember that an imperfect shot can be just as iconic and rewarding as a perfect shot. Back in the film days, imperfect shots were the norm, so sometimes a quote-unquote perfect shot can still have flaws that not many will notice or even care about. So don't put a ton of pressure on yourself to nail the settings every time. Even professionals have their off days, but they take it in stride and continue to move forward. Spontaneous shooting will also be helpful for you to recognize which photo scenarios speak to you the most. Is it shooting in the harsh sunlight, in the warm glow of golden hour, or in the dark nightscapes of the city? Is it when you're alone in a trail somewhere, or on a busy photo shoot with some models in specific outfits? Trying all of these different shooting conditions will not only help you build a versatile body of work, but it'll also help you learn how you might want to specialize later down the line. Number 4. Shoot first, publish later. Similar to the last tip, but this one comes in 2 meanings. 1. Don't limit yourself by whatever photography genre you decide to wear now or in the future. And 2. Don't start sharing all your photos right away when you're still learning the basics and finding your style. Unless you have amazing natural talent, you're going to want to wait a bit before you start publicizing your work, because your work will start to mature in quality only after consistent practice. If you're like me, your photography portfolio will also start off as a mess when you want to share your best shots that came from sheer luck. But portfolios deserve to be organized and coherent, so you need to develop your style first before getting a more presentable portfolio together. Your unique style of photography will also only start to emerge after you've been consistently practicing the craft. And unless you want your work to be inconsistent in quality, you want to hold back on publishing your shots right away. That said, I have one caveat. This doesn't apply if you're just wanting a space to share your work as it develops. Not every photographer needs to concern themselves with how they market themselves for professional work. Who am I to dictate what someone does with their photos anyway? This is just what I would have said to myself as a budding photographer. Number 5. Don't compare yourself to others too often. It's good to be inspired by others and to learn from others about useful techniques in shooting, editing, and other aspects of photography, but you also don't want to become a copycat, nor get discouraged by seeing how amateurish your work might be in comparison to your influences. As a beginner, you're expected to make mistakes and to take advice from other photographers to improve, but at some point you will need to break off from the norm if you want to be known for your own photographic vision, and not just as another startup photographer who never broke the mold set by their inspirations. Learn the rules of the art first from others, and then learn to break them in your own particular way. For me, I'm still honing my skills in much of the basics, but I have ideas for how I want to approach photography based on my other interests, and these ideas will help me determine my own unique style that sets me apart from the photographers that I admire and take influence from. Individualizing oneself from the huge community of photographers is the gold standard that separates the greats from the just good enoughs. Number 6. Print your work. Nothing is more informative about the flaws in your photography, from composition to image quality, than having physical copies of your work to scrutinize. You'll be able to notice flaws in your composition, your edits, or anything else that may not be as obvious on a digital screen. Printing your work is also a way for people to connect with your photography a lot more intimately than through a computer or phone screen. People are more likely to connect with you if they have a print that they can associate with you every time they look at it. It's like you're giving them a piece of yourself to keep and cherish. I myself enjoy having photographic merch from my favorite photographers, even as just a constant source of inspiration. For me, at first I thought it might come off as pretentious and egotistical if I offered my photography as gifts for the people in my life, especially when I think I still have a lot to learn. But from everyone I've asked, they've responded positively. Most of them see printed works as a way of not only supporting me and my art directly, but also as personalized gifts that just can't be bought in any store. This kind of perspective about printing work has helped motivate me to not only make my own 2021 calendar, but also to get offered my first art exhibition later this year. I wouldn't have even considered trying to share my art in these ways if I didn't value bringing my work into a physical form. And finally, number 7, pace yourself. Photography is one of my favorite hobbies because it challenges both the logical side of my brain and the creative side of my brain at the same time. Being able to wrestle between these two sides is a skill to be mastered in itself, and so it requires an immense amount of time. Don't feel like you need to be good at it right away. Mistakes are necessary to develop your mental workflow so that you'll be able to create satisfying works of art more and more quickly as it becomes more and more second nature to you. Not one photographer on this planet does photography at their full capacity at all times. Some days you won't be as motivated to get shots as other days. Some days you'll have opportunities for amazing shots, but your skills just aren't yet at the level you wish they were. Some days you'll be motivated, but the stars just don't align to get you that shot you were picturing in your head the whole week. There will always be more opportunities, so give yourself the breaks you need when your body feels fatigued and bored of the same old thing. Photography, at least for me, is meant to be therapeutic, not stressful, so pace yourself and be patient to find that balance between not too much photography to make you hate the camera, but just enough photography for you to want to make memorable works of art. And with that, I can't wait to see what memorable works of art you'll be making in the future. Thank you for listening to this episode of the GigabyteSpyder podcast. If you like what you heard, show it by dropping a like under this video. What do you think of my photography tips? Do you have anything to add or disagree with anything I've said? Let me know in the comments below. If you like nature photography, like landscapes and wildlife, you can check out my Instagram linked in the description, and feel free to share yours. Let's support our fellow photogs, whether they're masters or beginners. Be sure to subscribe to this channel if you'd like to hear more content about photography and a crap ton of other topics. I'll leave you with a bonus tip by Chelsea and Tony Northrup from their Picture This podcast.
The number 10 reason your photos suck?
You're afraid to fail. And I think this is a much bigger issue than photography, but I see it all of the time. Don't just stay within your comfort zone. Don't just shoot what you think other people want to see or what will make other people like your photo. I know that's so tempting, but you have to fail. You have to do a photo where people are going to go, oh, I don't like that. Because the best work is controversial. No famous photographer would have ever made it had their work not been a little bit polarizing. You have to be willing to risk being disliked to get the greatest work you're capable of making. And people will say they don't like it. And guess what? It doesn't always matter. They're not art critics. They're not the best photographers in the world, probably. You have to be willing to leave that comfort zone and push yourself.